Welcome back to our discussion related to Indian, Native, Aboriginal, and Indigenous identity. Now, we've done some comparing and contrasting with respect to what it means to be Aboriginal, what it means to be Native, what it means to be Indigenous, and what it means to be Indian. I want to focus just a bit now on this construct of Indian with respect to people who are in the Americas, because this name, even though it has been given a legal status, it is actually a very confusing label in terms of history. So when people are looking back 100 years from now and they are looking at this label Indian, what is it that they are really seeing? What are they thinking about when they see that? The same thing goes with African American. And so it's very important as you are understanding and framing your understanding of your identity, your understanding of your ancestry. It's very important that when you are labeling yourself, that you use the label that is most appropriate for you, given the reality of your ancestry, what you know about your ancestry. And you want to be very careful about taking on the labels that have been given by others. And so the name Indian has actually been given by others. The name African American has actually been given by others. And one of the things that you want to think about is who gave the names. These names serve some purpose. They serve some benefit to someone, even if it's not you. But the question is, where did the names come from? And one of the ways of understanding where the names come from or the purposes that they serve is to understand who gave the names in the first place. Now, we've talked about this before, but we're going to just look at a few names and then look at some correlates of these names. And we are not going to answer all of the questions here. This is homework for you. And so, particularly if you are identifying with any of these names, your homework is to start to do some research on these names. And how did you come to be known by these names? What are the questions that you haven't asked that you need to ask? And why don't you have the answers now? Because some of this is quite confusing and it's not clear why it's confusing. And so who's benefiting from this confusion? And so one example that we're going to look at is the Washita people. Along with the name Washita, you see a number of names related to those who are identified as American Indian and Native American. You see this dynamic that looks like there is a history of population transfer going on. If you look at the totality of these histories and you listen to these narratives, and then you look at dynamics such as phenotype, you look at the names, you see something that hints at population transfers from the east to the west and from the west to the east. And this name that you see on the screen is a piece of evidence manifesting a colonizer dynamic. Now, this name is associated with Washita, but when you look at the name and you break the name down and you start to look at the roots of the name and where you see this name appearing in terms of its components, you see that there is a colonizer dynamic that is related to this particular name. Now, because again, who the colonizers were and who the people are who identify by this name, you see a connection between the colonizers and this group of people who are identifying as American Indian. And so we're just going to look a little bit more closely at some of the components of this name so that you can see that this name appears to have roots in other places. And so again, although people may be concerned with issues related to Indian rights and land and things like that, one of the most important things is to figure out that ancestry and that identity and to get to the truth, because the truth is what's going to serve you the most in terms of understanding who you are, even if it's not the narrative that you've been told or the narrative you've been holding on to for the last couple of years or the last 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years. The important thing is to clarify that origin. Where are you originating from? Now, the first part of that name yields a very interesting result here. And so you see, when you look at the totality of the spelling, you see there's only one person bearing this root name. and it is in England. And then you see the variation of it primarily in Ethiopia, 1,969 people with this name. And so what you do is when you look at this is you start to ask, what is the relationship between this group with this name and these places? Do any of these people have any roots in any of these places? Because this is where these names are rooted. And so that's something very important to ask, particularly when you look at the situation in Ethiopia. Are these individuals claiming Ethiopia? And what this does when you start to make these sort of status claims, what this does is it may defeat a status claim. And so as soon as you start identifying as originating from or being entangled with other land spaces, it brings into question the Aboriginal status. It may not bring into question the native status or the indigenous status or the Indian status, but it will definitely bring into question that Aboriginal status. So that's definitely something that you want to look into a little bit more. And let's just look at some of the dynamics related to the name Washita. We've looked at some of this before, but let's just look at it more closely so that, again, when you start to frame your research, your identity search, you have a better idea in terms of where you need to be looking. And so with this name Washita, it's not something that is primarily found in the United States, in America. It's primarily out of Indonesia. And so you can see the overwhelming majority of people with this name are in Indonesia, followed by Japan. And so clearly this is showing some sort of root somewhere else. And again, because of the colonizer dynamic, it's very possible that you had colonizers who were involved in transplanting people from Indonesia, from Asia into the Americas. And so this is definitely something to keep in mind. And this map shows you a concentration of that name in the East. Now you have a variation of this name with the O-U-C-H-I-T-A and then the O-U-A-C-H-I-T-A. And you can see that there's pretty much an isolate of this name in Brazil, and then you see an isolate in the United States. With this name that's very similar to Washita, you have Wichita. And you can see that this name is distributed only in Thailand. We've talked about this name Chitta before, this word Chitta. And you can see when it's with one T that it is widely dispersed. But the concentration of the name is primarily in Africa, looking at Angola and Zambia. But you can see this name up into Asia, Eurasia. You see it in North, South, and Central America. So you see this name being widely dispersed, but there's a heavy concentration in Africa. Now this name is also related to the Bimba tribe. The Bimba tribe was a tribe that was involved in the transatlantic slave trade. And so there is some research on the Bimba tribe that you might want to look up. And this name apparently in this particular context means warrior. And here you can also see that when it's spelled with two T's, that it's primarily coming out of India and then with the highest density in Thailand. And this name Chata is another important one. And when you look, you can see that even though this name is integral to a number of people groups in the Americas, you see that the prevalence of this name is coming out of Cambodia. You do see a hot spot in South America, but for the most part, you see this name coming definitively from the East. You have a heavy concentration of the name also in India, but the heavy concentration is not where the group of people identifying by this name, it's not where they are, which is in the Americas, in the United States, in the Southeast woodlands. As we wrap this up, you can see at the end of the name the word Yah. Yah again is coming out of the east, and this name is understood by many people as one of the names of God. But again, this is coming out of the east, and so the question is, how did this name get associated with the southeast woodlands? Is this an adopted name? Is this a name that the people were actually using? The Aboriginal people, were they actually using this name? Where did it come from? And when you look at the dynamic with the colonizers, you see there's a heavy concentration of Moriscos and Moranos in that area. And so there may be a number of reasons why this name is being used in that particular area. The important thing is to get a better handle on who you are. Who are your ancestors? Who are your grandparents? Where did they come from? If you're Aboriginal, fine, you're Aboriginal. If you're Native, fine, you're Native. If you come from one clan in the Americas and then you have another clan from, other ancestors that are coming out of Scotland, for instance, then you have some other clans. But you are the sum total of all of these people groups, whether they are coming out of Cambodia, whether they are coming out of Thailand, whether they are coming out of India, whether they are coming out of Angola, whether they are from the Bemba tribe, whether they're coming from Ethiopia, whether they're coming from Scotland, Ireland, England, wherever your ancestors are coming from, you are the sum total of that. And it's important to embrace all of that if you want to get to the truth of where your ancestors have been and how you came to be what you are and where you are in present times and the implications for all of that. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care. See you soon.